and opinions expressed in the following program are those of the hosts and guests, and not necessarily those of the staff or management of Worldwide Digital Broadcasting Corporation.
Hi, I'm Dr. Andrea Gigline, and this is Serving Your Success. We're going to have a little bit more fun today than we usually do. Our guest who's been on a show before, Caitlin Kellogg, is back with us, and she's actually going to lead the discussion. As you know, this show is about, I know the surprise.
I didn't know that.
Just keep coming.
Yes. This show is about the application of positive psychology because that's what my love is. And there has been so much discussion about how to filter information that comes into our life. And the reason that's important within positive psychology and the work that I do is because what you allow into your head comes out your heart and becomes your life. So I decided to have Caitlin, who has an incredible background in political science, who has aspirations that I know she will achieve of being president of the United States, and is a magnificent, highly trained debater and the skill of debate to actually guide us, Sharon and I, today in a conversation about how do you, the viewer, get to apply the aspects of positive psychology on a very hot topic in our lives. Caitlin.
Hi. Good to see you.
Welcome back.
Here. Luckily, you weren't nearly as surprised as Sharon. You know,
I'm surprised.
She was a little surprised. She did come in. She had this magnificent outline, and she said, "I've been thinking about taking the subject this way." And I said, "Perfect. Would you like to lead that discussion?"
Oh, okay.
And here we are. Like,
Okay.
I just had to get all my thoughts organized, and obviously an outline is a great way to do that.
That's right.
So I guess where we should start in
Tell us what the
discussing
subject
today is
Yeah.
we're talking about how the information that is in our daily lives and how it affects us and affects our heart and eventually our life. And where do we get this information from? Where's that influence in modern day, 2016, almost 2017? And I think we all can agree that it's the internet.
Yeah.
It is
Absolutely.
numero uno internet. And that's large in part because it is constantly in our lives, and everything that we do is on our phone, it's on our computer, it's on our iPads, our tablets, whatever it might be. We are constantly surrounded by some sort of messaging or
Correct.
some sort of constant influx of information. And I think we can primarily look to social media platforms.
Yes.
Right.
And the influence that, Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all of these outlets have just taken this huge influence on, directing the way that information and the truth is portrayed.
Right. Or, I think saying the word the truth gets us into a little murky
Right,
territory.
absolutely.
But
Right.
just the way information is discerned. Like, I know you are not a Facebook user.
No, I'm
you
not.
use little to no social media.
I
Is that
use
correct?
Instagram and just
Text messages
text
and emails.
messages, email.
Okay.
Okay.
And primary sources of information for you?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, personally, I think I stick mostly to Instagram
Okay.
because for me, when I go on Facebook, it is just too much. It's like
overwhelming.
information overload. I cannot,
I do
fathom
not
all
want to
of
know this much about these people.
Right.
Absolutely, because what social media is at its truest core is an invite into your personal space.
Correct.
And whether people realize that or not, when they're posting whatever said information onto the interweb is debatable. But when you read that post from whatever said relative or friend or acquaintance, you take that and interpreted that, in my personal opinion, as like, okay, this person is talking to me. Like, I may not interpret it as like a face-to-face conversation, but it kind of gets sorted into those same, like, okay, well, here's this person I may know and these are their opinions, and it's going to affect the way you think about them or feel about them. So it kind of steals from that face-to-face interpersonal conversations you might have in like your daily life. And so I think for me, Instagram is better because it's just oftentimes pictures, and it's
Right.
easier when you come
Right.
home from the work day and you're like, I do just want to look at
Right.
pictures. I don't want to be overloaded with like, your philosophical thoughts on like whatever politics or whatever's going on in the world that day.
Well, and I have even a worse bias, and I will admit it. It's a bias. I will actually say this is my opinion, and I have tons of them, and many people
Right.
who know me wish I didn't have the opinions that I do. I mean, honestly, I've got an opinion about everything. Now, I have deep knowledge about some things.
Right.
If you want to talk to me about the application of positive psychology in your daily life, I'll go up against the
Right.
best
Right.
of people on how to do that.
I put my money on you.
Okay.
Yeah. Money's on you.
Now, if you want to ask me what is the best way to run a school district in any county in the country, I've got a lot of opinions.
Right.
I have no expertise whatsoever. And I may have anecdotal experiences, but what I feel has happened is that our opinions have been raised to a level that we actually think they're news.
Absolutely.
And I had the occasion of having a person in a graduate program with me, and I didn't like him very much, and he didn't like us, the rest of the class, nearly. He and I were probably the oldest people in the class.
okay.
So we had a lot of late 20, early 30 people, and
Okay.
we were probably at that time late 30s. And we were having a discussion about something, and he stood up one day and he said, you know, shared ignorance is still ignorance.
Ouch.
Yeah.
But I sat back and I said, man, that's right.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
I
man.
believe that has now been, that was in the very early 1990s. We're now 20 years later, and that concept of sharing an opinion and raising it to a point of truth or fact,
Right. Right.
No.
Absolutely.
Not working.
And I think that's basically after this last election cycle is a question that's been raised is I think even President Obama referred to Facebook after this last election as a dust cloud of nonsense.
oh, that's great.
The President of the United States is
That's
saying
great.
that. He's
Okay.
like sounding the alarms like, okay, everybody, we all need to take a step back and go,
Yes.
we have a problem here.
Correct.
And how do we fix it? What's our call to action? And I don't know, what do you guys think that maybe some of these calls to action might be? Like, how do we help solve for this crisis?
Yeah.
It's been a big issue. I mean, I used to be nonstop news junkie for sure. I mean,
So where would you get your
constantly.
news?
Definitely CNN,
Okay.
NBC, Internet, Washington Post, New York Times.
Okay. Okay, right.
I'm old school.
Okay, you're old school, and would you have been able to say that you knew that what you were reading was across a spectrum, or was it generally center left? The
So
things that you
I mean, fairly liberal
Right,
and
okay.
fact checked, but then I have people in my
well
life
edited,
like
well copyrighted.
well,
yeah,
yes,
okay.
well written or well copywritten. So then I have my best friend and my father who are like Republicans, like right here, chirping, chirping, chirping. Fox News, definitely chirp, 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 chirp. Email sending me about how bad the government
Everything
is,
was.
Right.
including anything associated with Clinton or Obama. So I had them constantly in my ear, and I was like, "We got this. I'm gonna win, and we're gonna. You know, my side is definitely gonna win." Well, I mean, on election day, my mouth was like on the floor, and they were like, nobody called me. They were so
Right.
scared to call, and then the next day they're like, how you doing? You know, very,
Right,
you know,
absolutely.
gingerly, I would
So
say.
what are you doing today? Like, are you
Nothing. I can't watch the news.
Yeah.
You know, I'm
I
having
know
a
that
really
I've
difficult
gotten-
time. I watch Charlie Rose religiously, and I'm trying to like absorb some
No,
of this.
I don't watch.
of
I have watched some of his programs. Would he be considered mid-center, general, just
I would say
well-educated?
well educated.
Yeah. Okay.
I would say he tries to keep it neutral, but
Right.
he was definitely on the Clinton side.
Okay.
But he really tries to be neutral as possible.
And I think that's,
I mean, he has people from both sides. It doesn't. His guests
Right.
are all across the board.
you know, where I'm coming back is truly centered in my work. I was a person who never chose to change the whole world or the team. I didn't go into corporations and want to help the whole team, you know, do something differently. I took it one person at a time.
Okay.
So where I'm taking myself slowly, where I am taking anyone I work with, is back to the concept of individual responsibility.
Right.
I have a responsibility to check things, which I have always done because of
Right.
in education, I was not permitted. And I've said it on the show before, until I graduated with my doctorate, as far as writing papers was concerned, I was not permitted an opinion. I had to have evidence
Right.
documented on all sides, and I was allowed to sculpt an argument based on evidence that was
said
proven.
fact. Right.
Right. So then all of a sudden you get out of school, and all of a sudden you can say that, you
Right.
know,
Your opinion.
Yeah, my opinion now has some value. I haven't understand how that works, but I know that it does.
Right.
So so where I'm taking myself back, but I have found, like you, that I have not been able,
Can't watch.
because, and I'm going to tell you from my perspective what I can't watch. They are doing such a miserable job collectively. They meaning trusted news sources, sources that were structured to be the people who delivered news versus Oprah Winfrey that was delivering an opinion or a thought,
Right.
or, you know, and that line got blurred. We have to have organizations earn back the right to be news, and then make sure everybody knows everything else is opinion.
Right.
And that blurred line is no longer about the investigative reporter doing a great job,
Right.
no matter, you know, the movie Spotlight this year was for me such a beautiful dramatization of what it really looks like when people are, one, deeply entrenched in something religiously,
Yes.
and information comes before them, and as trained journalists, how their own eyes didn't see the information 20 years earlier, and that it took, and what it took personally, the personal breakdown, for them to go against their own religious beliefs to keep going in the story.
Right.
Okay, I want that back.
Right.
That's who I want to watch. So for the moment, I have to take responsibility and step back and say, okay, what is the standard I want to live to?
Right, absolutely. And I think it's people have to work for their freedom. Otherwise, freedom
Yes.
won't work for the people. And I think ultimately you kind of step back and you go, well, how do I start that process for myself? And I'm sure that's different for each one of us here. But for as a people, in regards to politics and towards like the longevity of our country and how the news is affecting our lives and also affecting our futures, I think it's tough because that's a huge responsibility, and for people to kind of step back and realize that that's number one, like, okay, digest that, and number two, it's also being able to step outside yourself,
Right.
and go, okay, here are my beliefs. Are these sound? Are these reliable? Are these, am I being the best version of myself?
Do you have to question if it sounds so much as knowing just that you feel this way? Like,
Right.
I may have an opinion about tattoos. Okay. And my opinion about tattoos really doesn't mean anything other than to myself.
Right.
Right.
And just me knowing that, I think when it becomes a problem, and I've crossed this line,
Right.
is when my opinion about tattoos impacts your life. Just ask my daughter. I mean, trust me, it's
There it
happened. Piercings, tattoos.
Right.
I have an opinion.
And so does she.
And there you go. There you go.
So I feel like I have two parts of me. I have my personal side where I'm throwing parties to generate money to, have our senator elected. And
Right.
then there's another part of me that's a parent where I'm like, I say to my daughter who's crying, after post-election, and I said, you know what, this is the United States of America, and we accept it and we move on.
Right.
So I'm putting on this face
Absolutely.
for her that, you know what, it's going to be okay, whatever it is, we're going
Right.
to move on. Inside, I'm like, I
Sure.
feel like the news, even the best of the best are scrambling.
Yeah.
They don't have all these inner contacts. They're
No,
so
the structure's been broken down.
right, the structure.
We
and
have
now
to
he's
rebuild
going
the
out
structure
and he's
of
hiring
information.
business people who they don't have contacts for.
Correct.
And I feel like that's a whole different. The news is learning how to redo the news.
Correct. And,
So,
and that's why
it's
I'm
scrambling.
backing up. Unlike you, politics is the thing that I care about the least.
Right.
When you run for president, I will cross that
Yes,
line.
I will. I do care about the politics.
I think
care.
When I was on Face the Nation,
Yes.
ever since I was little, I told you that I had this idea that I wanted to be the first
Yes.
female president of the United States, and my whole family kind of rallied behind that. Empowerment,
Yes.
she's confident, and I think the phrase we coined was "vote for Kate in 28." I think I will be
love that.
Oh,
eligible.
You have my vote. You have my vote.
we're gonna
You guys can help push that message
we're
at
gonna
some
we're,
point.
we're gonna push that message.
Right.
We could have a little banner
Fantastic.
across the bottom of the show.
Yeah, the little run
28.
across the runner.
That's-
Fantastic.
yeah.
But I think that the news is learning to rebuild itself because
Yes.
I think social media completely destroyed the entire infrastructure of what news
I think
actually
the concept
was.
of speed.
Right, true.
We have allowed the false image that everything must be responded to quickly. I had a very beautiful thing occur in the last week. I had a birthday and I had lots and lots of friends and phone calls and emails and lots of messages on Facebook, which years ago I had stopped really responding to those
Right.
until the following day when I could actually read them. But I found something very interesting. If someone wrote me an email and I didn't pause on in that moment
Right.
and respond, they were then sending me a text message to check if I saw the email. And I'm thinking, when we used to send a card to someone, you knew that the card had been delivered and the love and the message had been delivered. Now, so in something as lovely as a birthday wish, we have added layers of communication. Well, that's the good stuff.
Right.
Look at what we've done in the not so good stuff.
Yeah.
With, has it been 40 years since CNN went to 24-hour news?
Probably.
I think that that's one of our first, whereas it was excellent for some things.
Yes.
It was that graduation up from news doesn't only happen at 6 o'clock at night.
Right.
And, a lot could, you could have get a lot of information. We went from there to having to fill airtime.
Right, absolutely. And I think large in part there was this trust between the American people and journalism and the media, and you could turn on the news and be like, okay, I'm going to see an array of ideas and thoughts, and social media came along and was like, perfect, I'm going to capitalize on this trust, on this fabulous relationship that currently exists. And it had a respectful time. You could turn on the TV, you could read the newspaper. Now with your phone, it's constantly there, so social media knows that too. So it took a beautiful relationship and completely just
But
exacerbated.
for some things,
any
I
issue.
like it. I like knowing
Right.
there's an earthquake, in the middle of the night. Now, how do you, as this generation, Z, you are a Z?
I'm millennial.
No, she's a millennial.
Oh, you're a millennial.
I'm millennial.
How do you feel about this president-elect tweeting?
I mean, I think this is where it goes back to personal responsibility and applying positive psychology, because for me, I understand that Donald Trump is the president of the United States of America.
Not
and-
yet, but yes,
Well,
soon to be.
President-elect.
Calm down, girl.
President-elect.
Calm down.
Valid point. I appreciate the passion.
We still have a couple weeks.
True, but that you never know. So valid point. So I think for me, I had to at an early age, because social media kind of came in for me around probably middle school to high school. It really started. Facebook started picking up when I was a junior in high school, so probably around 2008, 2009.
Correct.
And at first, it was this huge kind of burden, but also incredible opportunity, because you're I can talk to my friends at any hour of the day, and there's all these pictures, and I get to share my life. But also, there was that influx where I'm like, okay, whoa, this is way too much. I need to turn off the internet and go somewhere else. And I think that for me, I practiced that discipline early on. And so when I see information like Donald Trump, who's, pretty hot on the phone to tweet out whatever he's thinking. I mean, for him, that's a personal, decision.
Correct.
And it may not be one I would make for myself, but God bless you, Donald Trump. I hope you realize now as you move forward, these tweets do have influence.
Right, and I think that's where I will go back to personal responsibility, because no one could have greater angst with our president-elect than me. I mean, it's personal in our house.
Yes.
And my country means far more to me
Right.
than any individual. My responsibility is to hold my leaders accountable at a
Absolutely.
different level for base behavior. You know, in the last week, I was sitting there, and what I've been doing is practicing how I would prefer they would answer versus how they answered. So the majority,
Right.
I like that you're practicing what
I'm
you preach.
I'm practicing. So here's what it looks like on a really important issue, because it troubles me, because I know in the science of emotional intelligence and the impact of that, the worst thing that can happen to us is when our little amygdalias get flamed up and it takes over all the logical thinking of the executive function. You do everything in order to make a clear decision. You do everything in your power not to have that happen.
Right.
Social media and ways of being in flames. So there was some truly undocumented misinformation about a number of people, meaning millions, who had voted incorrectly or fraudulently. I don't even read the thing, so whatever the terminology was, all I know is that the Speaker of the House was then questioned about it, and it was very clear this intelligent, well-disciplined man did not believe one iota about that terminology, and so he kept moving the egg from here to here, because he didn't want to say, no, that was my boss did a silly thing and said a dumb thing, which I don't think he needs to say.
Right.
Here's what I think he could have said when this, Donald Trump did this. Who cares? The response can be, that is not the opinion I hold. I have checked the facts as a leader of the
Right.
Senate,
Right.
and I am confident that we are okay. He doesn't have to dish his boss.
Right.
Right.
And we need to get back to that, where
Absolutely.
you don't think that saying your hair's on fire is the answer. That's not the answer. The answer is this information correct?
Right.
Because instead of making the news about whether or not the information is correct, we're now saying, well, this guy said this, and
Right.
that woman said
He said,
that.
she said, he said,
Oh,
he said.
I don't care. I mean, I love people, and I just don't care this much. Your opinion is meaning less and less to me every day.
Right, but I think there's a concept within that idea, and it's now we're having all this information being thrown at us, and the American people are reading it and taking it as fact, as truth, and it becomes their reality.
Yes.
And that's who they vote or how they spend their money, and that's influencing our daily lives. So we kind of have to look at social media platforms and news outlets and go, okay, who's going to be the keeper of the truth?
The gatekeeper.
The gatekeeper.
Yes.
You are now have that burden. How are you going to ensure that the American people receive information in a manner that they deserve? And that's to uphold, I think, the principles of American values, where it's piety, it's balance, it's being able to have justice and liberty and all the freedoms that, were promised to us back in 1776. And that's what I think we also have kind of lost sight of, unfortunately.
Well, so then how do we do that? Like, what has to happen? What
has
can
to
happen?
So I think when you're looking to social media platforms, when you Google, like, how do we solve for the fake news crisis, there's a couple different options that come up. But I think ultimately what will wind up happening is Facebook is going to put in an algorithm. And I think what the most viable option was they were going to start creating these algorithms that would promote partisan news. So it would mostly be like reporting, like, here's what the liberals are saying, here's what the conservatives are saying, like just like this kind of unbiased ability to promote this information.
Do either of you know this magazine?
I do
Yes.
not.
Do you know this magazine?
Yes.
Okay,
The week.
The Week. So what do you think about it? And then I'll talk about it for a second.
I haven't seen it in a while, but I would, first glance, as I know of it, is to be conservative.
Okay, so that's interesting that you say that. Because I didn't take it that way.
Really?
Yeah. So what this magazine, it's called The Week, and it started showing up at our door a few years ago,
Okay.
and we really got hooked on it. And what I liked about it was that in the articles, they actually tell me both
Sides.
Fantastic.
in one article. And so then I could go and actually look deeper. Like if I read something on one of the sides, I can then look that up and say, wait a minute, is that really what that?
Right.
Yes.
Or do you align yourself? I find that sometimes I find myself as to one side, but then I read both sides and I'm like, oh, I could kind of see myself.
Oh,
over
I'm very
here.
much, I have to say that.
So some of it is, as I get older, I'm more financially conservative,
Absolutely.
obviously, but
Right. But what I liked about this was that it was giving me both sides within.
Right.
I didn't have to know that the New York Times tended to lean left and
Right.
the New York Post leans I don't know where. But the ability to see something and have it give me both sides and I make a decision.
Right.
And I'm going to cop to something really quick.
Okay.
That I'd like to talk to you about.
Okay.
I don't read the New York Times. I can't read, my joke is my books are 5,000 words. How can I
Right.
read an article that are
Right.
15,000 words?
Absolutely.
I read the
honest-
Sunday. I read the Sunday Times.
So I've always been honest that on a day-to-day basis, I'm not sitting down and reading a
Right.
15,000 word article that has been magnificently researched. I don't do it. But I do want to get an idea of something that I should pay attention to.
Right.
And the ability to have that done with integrity in shorter bites versus 140 characters of nonsense.
Right.
I mean, an
tough.
idea really can't be expressed in 140 characters. Let's start there.
Yes.
And you said something about people reading the things on Facebook. I would argue that, in fact, they read the headline
Right.
and maybe the first two sentences. We are actually not reading. And believe me, years ago, I know that I fell into that. If something popped through and it was funny or da-da-da-da-da.
Right.
Meanwhile, I didn't read it. But then some really crazy stuff started happening. This is really way beyond. This is because I've been on Facebook since '07 for business reasons.
Right.
And I thought, this is nonsense. And so sites like Truth or Fact,
Right.
I would immediately check. And then if it was nothing, I didn't have to go back and tell the person, boy, you're loopy. I just ignored it. I
Right,
didn't
right.
pass it along. I
Right.
didn't do those things. But I think our ability to have concise, accurate information, because we do have the sources are just too numerous.
Well,
for
I
us
feel like
to
I'm
discern.
bombarded.
Yes.
So I tend to scan the headlines.
Right.
And then if something catches my eye, I go in depth and read about it and I check sources, but I read the headlines. That's how I scan news these days.
The second thing, though, about algorithms. So we care, and I had it happen to me this weekend when I was doing a book signing. A gentleman, and he was definitely about 70 years old or so. He kept loitering around the area. And at one point, my husband, who was Santa Claus, was saying, what is that man doing? And I said, well, every so often he comes over and chats a little bit. And at one point he came over and he said to me, do you read the internet? And I said, yes. Cautiously, yes.
Yeah.
And he said, are you aware that the banks are all closing on January 1st?
Which means?
And I looked at him and I was like stunned. And I
Okay, yeah.
right. Okay. So I said, actually, that isn't something that I would tend to believe. But let me just leave you that we are a very resilient people, and no matter what happens on January 1st, we're going to figure it out.
Did you say it's a federal holiday?
No. No. Are you kidding? I was too stunned.
I hope I hope they're closed.
But right.
Okay.
But I'm going to tell you what I wish I had said differently.
Okay.
Because an algorithm is lovely for people who care to know that the algorithm. I can find out, there are people who will find out they're running that algorithm and stay
Right.
away from it.
And stop.
How dare you,
Right.
do
Censor.
that. Yes. So for me, I wish I had said to him, rather than try and let him know everything was going to be okay, which is a very annoying attribute I have, I would have asked, is that what you want to have happen?
Right.
Okay.
I wouldn't have thought of that.
Okay, and believe me, at that moment, my brain was like,
like,
"Oh no! What do you mean? This is like Y2K all
So
over
am
again.
am I missing? I mean, is this what people are afraid of?
This is,
I
but here's
haven't
the
even-
challenge. Okay. And it's the challenge of why we would have been surprised at the evening of November 8th. There are groups of people, and no one knows what the numbers are, with that conversation. They see something on the internet, and all of us have gone to sites that initially we thought were valid.
Right. Absolutely.
And then we realize they're not. But someone, if you're feeding me something I want, if I am already dissatisfied with the bank rates, if I've lost my house, if this, if any one of a number of things has happened to me, and this piece of information is something I want to be true,
Right.
my brain is already in the this is true category.
Right.
And all that makes me is human. It doesn't make me some hated person one way or the other. It just makes us human. But what I have become, more and more aware of is that how do we engage people who think so dramatically differently than we do? Like, instead of me thinking I should pump this guy up and say, okay, so what I really wanted to say was, are you nuts? No, I didn't say
Right.
that. What I said was, that we're gonna work it out one way or the other. But that really wasn't my whole truth either. I mean, that little voice of like, really?
Right.
And I am a person who believes the banks could close at any moment. I believe our system, because I was taught in the 90s by a guy out of Stanford who showed us in black and white that only 5% of the money that changes hands on any given day, now this was 1994 that he taught us this, I don't know what the number is today, I think it's actually a lot worse, only 5% of the money that changes hands on any given day is actually for the purchase of a good or service. The rest of the money that gets moved around is all electronic nonsense, is all the hedging your bet on this account, buffering up loans over here.
Right.
It is a global situation, and the only way, and this was his point, the only way this system doesn't fall apart is if it has high integrity.
Right.
That you can trust that the people on the other side moving the money have something other than their own interest at heart.
Right.
Which goes right back to positive psychology. The highest levels of personal satisfaction, personal well-being is when you, in fact, care about other people
Right.
ahead of yourself.
Absolutely. And that's an issue with the algorithm because
Correct.
these engineers who Facebook or Twitter or Instagram hires, they're getting paid to create an algorithm. They're not getting paid to have integrity.
No.
And so I think that's when you have the responsibility. You have that personal responsibility again to be able to step back and go, okay, well, everything that I read on Facebook, take it with a grain of salt.
Right.
Or, whether these, new implementations, like that I was talking about, the nonpartisan index, where, Facebook might have, these articles scanned and then reflect them back to like a heat map where comparing them to political opinions. So then you have these like bipartisan views and you can kind of have like it's encouraged. I don't know if we'll ever truly solve for fake news as a whole. I think that is going to be a perpetual issue.
But do we have to solve for fake news, or do we have to learn that just because we're 400 million people doesn't mean we're supposed to all think alike?
Right.
That we can cooperate
Absolutely.
and have dramatically different opinions
Right.
and still move forward. Like to me, it's how our expectation
Right. Uh-huh.
that we're all supposed to agree. Like, why do I have to agree with you? Why do people who love tattoos have to go by my standard?
Right. Absolutely.
But that's part of America. I mean, is to put up with differences. People do it every day.
I know, but I don't feel we are putting up with differences now. I think we have assigned right and wrong, and we're doing it at a very high volume. The loudest
I don't
person in
feel-
the room is the
The winner.
opinion. Yeah. And for me, the concept is I want to see the loudest whisper win.
Right, and I think that in turn goes back to social media, and that shaming has become a huge
Yes.
thing. Because here's what I personally feel like. You have like let's say politics, for example. I have friends who are liberals, I have friends who are conservatives, and at some point, everybody was able to kind of like get along and be like, okay, here's why you think that, and here's why I think that, and that's totally okay, and I respect your opinion, and
Right.
I feel that I still exercise that. But what happens is on social media, there are people who belong to these groups, and this shaming, like, well, conservatives are wrong because of this, and I feel, oppressed. And then, conservatives come back, well, they say this, and, the liberals say this, and I feel oppressed. And it's no longer, nobody's listening anymore. It's just like they just want to be heard, and no one wants to reach that, like, sense of respect and compromise in the middle, because people just feel like they're being attacked and shamed constantly. At least that's from what I can tell.
So how would an algorithm, and I want to add an additional statement to it. You said that the software, and I don't remember the exact terminology that the exact phrase, but it was, they're designing an algorithm. It's not about integrity for them. And what I want to discern that a little differently, that the integrity that a person brings to the job is to make sure they're developing an algorithm that in fact is doing the thing that the algorithm is supposed. That's the integrity that you're seeking in a software.
Absolutely.
Okay. And how do we, have all of our various friends, like my friends, I have some deeply devout religious in my life, who are biblical literalist. I could be further from a biblical literalist. I like stories.
Right.
Jesus and I got along really well. He told me a story, I knew what to do.
Right. Perfect. Got it.
This guy was into stories.
Parables.
I
all
liked
good
it.
to go.
Yeah, I like that. And we have sat and very caringly. I have been in very, very liberal. My liberal friends would see me as very conservative.
Okay.
My conservative friends see me as extreme. Oh, it's comical. It's like, and who are they telling me what I am? They're telling me who they are.
They're comparing to, it's all relative.
It is. I've had people assume that I am for or against something because of my religious background. Instead of, I may hold an opinion, but maybe it's not because of my religion. Like, there's different things. We do that to each other, but we can do it caringly. We can let people know, I don't agree with you, but that doesn't mean you have to do it differently. Now, are you going to be screaming at me? Like, I stopped watching, and I will tell you, because of the quote. Do you want to read the quote that you sent over about John Adams?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's see here.
And then I'll tell you what I did with that.
So we were reading on what with personal responsibility and what that requires, and that requires like perhaps a moral responsibility, because a personal responsibility is oftentimes associated with a moral responsibility. And so it kind of got us thinking about the Constitution and what that all means, because there are moral responsibilities within that document. And there's a quote by founding father John Adams that says, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people." And that's a huge statement.
Right.
And I mean, also, granted, at the time that was said, 1798, because that was President John Adams to the officers of the 1st Brigade of the 3rd Division. He was addressing the militia. And very much God was synonymous with the founding of America. Right. And what I think for him, God equated to morality. And oftentimes morality and religion go hand in hand, because it allows you to go, okay, well, here's right and wrong. It gives you that
was
moral
our school
compass.
for right and wrong. That before there was ways of seeing the person in the village next to you, you depended on the belief systems of the tribe.
Right.
And the tribe went to churches and synagogues. Like, religions grew up for that purpose.
Right.
Absolutely.
But what I have been taken with all of that is that we will have statements thrown at us like that one.
Right, that one.
And there won't be a discussion of, I wonder what religion meant in 1798. What was that versus what it is today? And we just will want to go back in history and use whatever term, that quote. And I know that quotes in general are something I use in my work all the time, but I had started saying supposedly, the person supposedly, because I'm actually not reading these documents. Everything I'm getting is 100 things removed.
Right.
And it makes, the whole reason we're having this conversation is because our daily lives are being taken over in a way that lead us to believe that we don't have a way out. And we're saying, oh, yeah, you do have a way out.
Yes, there is.
And it starts
Absolutely.
with individual responsibility. It starts by backing up. But what I did was I then went, because what you had sent me over was a thing on Glenn Beck. And I don't watch.
He's not on my list.
Okay, but wait a minute. I want to tell you what I did do. I Googled, or talk show hosts. Okay, everyone that came up happened to be a conservative.
Right.
So then I realized that every one of the names that came up, because I don't watch those, so I cannot tell you who a liberal. I could tell you Jon Stewart.
Jon Stewart,
Okay.
yeah.
And honestly, I was saying, my gosh, everyone I think is liberal are the comedians who have these outrageous IQs. And so I pay attention to them. I mean,
Right.
these are incredibly smart men and women.
Right.
And so I am looking to them to put some humor to things that don't feel great
Right.
to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
But when I actually looked to see if there were people who are watching Glenn Beck and
Right.
Hannity,
Sean Hannity.
Sean Hannity, and I forget, there were 2 or 3 other names. Where's the other side? And I realized there isn't another. They listed some names. I knew none of them. Okay, and I thought, well, isn't that interesting? The actual talk show and and I will say that I am offended by the delivery. I can't judge the man. I have never watched his show.
Right.
But the tone of Rush Limbaugh, and that was the first thing. I do not need you to yell at me. I want you to educate me.
Right.
I want you to inform me. Do I want you to be entertaining as hell, i.e. why I like the Jon Stewarts of the world?
Right.
I want you to say something factually cryptic and true, but do it with a soft heart and really,
And some
lace it-
wit.
And some wit.
Yes.
That's the part. When you're yelling at me, I mean, I love Jim Cramer for his financial information. I have a hard time watching the guy's show.
Right.
Jim,
Yeah.
stop yelling. Maybe I can get the
Yelling.
information down.
Right.
And that's the difference. Like, how do we educate in an entertaining way and not be hateful when we do it?
Right. And that's tough. And I mean, I think when I read a little bit more about the John Adams quote and like what it meant and like I was trying to understand, where is this man coming from like X amount of years ago and why did he say this? And he was saying there's a moral responsibility, and part of that moral responsibility is education. And it was kind of what I touched on earlier, that there's a responsibility to educate the people, like the men and women, to constantly understand the nature of your society and how it's evolving. And that applies to modern day, United States of America. And that's what he was encouraging, because John Adams is a founding father. He was a very religious man. And he was also one of the most concerned with the longevity of the republic.
Right.
So he was constantly, like, his schools of thought were like, okay, I get it. I'm going to be alive for this long, but what about future Americans? And so
Right.
he constantly urged this education to uphold, awareness and to keep piety and to have balance. And so he's actually quite incredible when you
Right.
read about, because there's
Which
like,
I have not done, trust
right.
me.
Yeah,
I
I
love
haven't
the founding fathers. I love reading all about what they were
That's
like.
why you're Kate in 2028.
There we go.
Yeah, let's be really
There we go. Yes.
I don't know what our slogan's going to be.
Yeah.
We'll come up with one. So.
Maybe this is what Trump was talking about, the whole election process.
Yeah.
The whole, maybe he was more in touch with what people were saying and how unhappy they were, because it's been the same political machine
Right.
all these years.
Absolutely.
And maybe, we are that out of touch. I mean,
And I've got to say that because of what I believe spiritually and what I teach, when things are at their worst, I do believe that because I believe in the concept of balance and the physics of balance, that
Right.
yes, things can look really terrible and yes, things can look really great. And that when they swing one way, we are then called, because trust me, I wouldn't have had this conversation 3 years ago.
Right.
no.
I'm not dying to have it today, but I definitely wouldn't have spent my life having these conversations. And maybe that's part of what we're being called to do collectively, to hear better so that more voices are understood. Doesn't mean we're going to get what we want, but more
Right.
voices are in it. I will still go back though. Keep the amygdala down and clamp down so that you can have loving, fun conversations. Like, I don't like political correctness has taken a lot of humor out of the world for me. I like that humor. And I don't like that we have to go really extreme in our humor to be that versus using it offhandedly. Like, there's lots of things I would like to see differently.
Right.
And rather than put it all on just you, collect up your generation.
Oh boy.
So how many different
But they
opinions would
do
we
seem
have?
more
then?
open to it than our generations
yeah.
do. I mean, they definitely seem, people are more out of the closet in every sense of the way than they were in my generation or Andrea's. I think that they can have those agreements to disagree even more so than our generations. Our generations.
Well,
tend to-
she just made a statement. Is that your experience? Do you think?
Can you agree to disagree? I mean, you were talking about your Friendsgiving.
Right.
And you
Absolutely.
and you were disagreeing, but agreeing to disagree over
Absolutely.
dinner.
And it was incredible. And that I was up in San Francisco. So I've actually had two really incredible experiences within the last month. So I was up in the heart of San Francisco for a Friendsgiving, which would be classically liberal. And everybody I was sitting around, I sit happily in the middle. I don't identify. I don't like to identify with political parties because it's just.
That's what I like about
It's
her.
not
Yeah.
my
Be
thing.
independent.
I look at each school of thought.
Make a
and go,
good
"I like this,
Make a
I
good
like this,
case.
I
I
like
can
this."
sway.
There you go. Boom. And so I was able to go up to Friendsgiving and be like, okay, here's what I think, about Donald Trump, about Hillary Clinton. Everyone was like, I understand. Here's what I think. And it was an extremely civil conversation, and it was incredible, and a lot of positive and action items came out of that, to where I was like, okay, we're all going to be okay. So then last weekend, I went to a wedding in South Carolina. So what would be typically classified as a conservative area. And so I'm going, okay, I'm a little worried now too, because I was worried when I was up in San Francisco that I'm going to get beat up for the conservative ideals I have. And then now I'm going to, the South. I'm like, oh God, I'm going to get beat up for the liberal ideals I have. Like, here we go. Same conversations. And it was so beautiful. We're all sitting there at a wedding, and I'm like, well, and I was telling Andrea this. I was like, I was the one who set the fire. I was like, so who'd everyone vote for? and everyone was like, come on, tell me what's going on. And everyone was like, I didn't really like either one of them, or I like Trump, or I like Hillary. And everyone was going, okay, like, I see why you think that, Caitlin. And then ultimately what I think came out of it, which gave me like a lot of hope for my generation, was they were like, I don't feel like either of these political candidates identify with the party. And what this campaign has kind of done is taken, the liberals or the conservatives or certain ethnic groups or certain genders and just kind of isolated them and made them out to be bad or good. Like, it wasn't this
labels.
like mixed group of people. And what really we all kind of decided was, wow, for every race, for every creed and culture, there are bad and good people.
Absolutely.
And so that ability for them, like, everybody that I just met these people at this wedding, for them to like reach that.
Oh, you're really great.
Like that
Great
depth.
dinner companion.
I like
Here,
your friends.
we just met. Let me hear your deepest.
Like, I don't want to know about how many dogs you have or what your Instagram account is. Like, tell me your
why I
deep
like her
thoughts.
so
Yes, we
So,
love you.
It was really reassuring, because for me to deal with everything that's happened in this election cycle, I want to know everybody else's thoughts. Like,
Sure.
what's going on? Like, am I off kilter? Like, where am I at? And where is, these perfect strangers I met? And I was going, okay, this is good. Like, we're going to heal from this, whole election cycle. It's all going to be okay, because my generation's up and coming. We're, the next leaders of the United States of America. And
Absolutely.
I think it's crucial for our recovery to be able to create policy or precedent, or just within your own life, applying positive psychology or your personal, responsibility. It was very reassuring, and it left me with such a sense of hope. It really did.
Oh, terrific. So why don't we wrap up? And is there something that you want to make sure that we all know going forward?
I think so. I think that, when we're looking towards the future and what it all means, like what social media means and what our personal responsibility means, I think ultimately you just have to find what works for you in your daily life, because like you said earlier,
Right.
you can, you helped one person at a time.
Right.
And you can't help other people if you don't help yourself first.
Correct.
So, within your own ecosystem, you have to find what works for you and see how that can eventually go on to help other people. I mean, we can't, we can do our best to solve the world's problems, but, your world is where it starts. And I think that's the most important. And just as long as you are sure of your beliefs and sure of how your personal responsibility, then, that's the first step. And that's what we need to look at first. Not like
Right.
the whole, how do we solve the
Big.
crisis? It's like,
No.
okay, one step at a time. And I
Right.
think if we
Right.
start with ourselves, we can eventually reach an incredible, all-encompassing solution.
Super.
So I've gotten to the point, this is my conclusion, that I am trying to filter back into this news media
Right.
situation. And I'm trying, I really am trying to keep an open mind with everything going on and all the appointments coming up. And I'm trying to, I'm really trying to see, are we so off? Are we so off? Is this going to be a positive outcome? And if
Right.
so, I'm interested to see how they're going to do this. I
Right.
mean, I'm holding on, I'm white knuckling it a little bit. But I'm really holding on to the fact that, I have a daughter. I want to see how things
Sure.
play out for her
Right.
generations to come. And, I'm trying to keep the hope and see maybe there is something positive we can change about this.
Yeah. And what I want to leave you with is, which is the core of the work that I do. Within a very short period of time, the word hope and positive, and that there is, spend your days seeing where there is hope so that you can shore yourself up and join with others, even if they disagree with you, so that as we move forward, we will be more collectively responsible. The conversation will not be this fractured. It can be that different, but it doesn't have to be that fractured. And in my latest book, one of the things that I had was the three S's of success: show up, shut up, and shine. We need to listen a whole lot more. Come together and move forward. That's in your workplace, it's in your home, and clearly in our political system at this point. So have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your day, and know that hope springs eternal. Thank you.
Thanks for having
you.
me.
Thank you. Thank you.